Cool. So it was my pick this week.
You know?
I'm really excited to talk about this movie. I was really excited to find this movie on Netflix because I've been trying to see it for like a year, and I didn't know that Netflix bought it. It's been on Netflix since May of 2024, and I just found out like last week. The movie is Adagio. This film was directed and co-written by Stefano Sollima, who directed Subura, which is one of my favorite movies we've done on this podcast, one of my favorite crime movies I've seen in the past 5, 6, 10 years, whatever.
Quite good. And the Tibbs were really nice.
I am obsessed. I loved that movie so much, and I have since watched all of his movies. I finished, today's Friday, Wednesday night, I finished watching all of his features. He's done a lot of TV, so I got to catch up on that, but so he has something that's called the Roman Crime Trilogy. This is the third film, so it's the final film.
Okay.
Subura is the second one.
Okay.
The first one, which was his first feature from 2012, is called All Cops Are Bastards, which that was the one I was just telling you about the other day, where it's just everyone in that movie is a hawk.
See, I thought that's what you were saying about this.
No.
Okay.
That's the movie I watched.
And I was like, yeah, some of these guys are hot.
No, this is not nearly as hard. I think this is the most subdued of the three, for sure. So this movie, like I said, it premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2023, and this movie came out around the same, in Italy, I should say, around the same time that we watched Subura. So I was reading about it, and I was like, I got to see this movie.
Gotcha, okay.
So the cast includes Pierfrancesco Favino, who plays the politician in Subura, the guy who's smoking the crack and the prostitute dies, and remember that guy?
Yeah, I remember. What was he?
He's the guy with no hair.
The bald guy?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I didn't recognize him at all. Yeah, I
didn't recognize
his performance. I thought was incredible.
He was good.
Tony Servillo is in this movie, so he plays the guy who has dementia.
Okay.
And he's very famous. He's in like The Great Beauty, El Divo, Gomorrah, like tons of famous Italian films. Valerio Mastrandrea, he plays the blind guy.
Okay.
Adriano Gianni, I think he's or Adriano, he's the cop.
Okay.
And then Gianmarco Francini is the kid.
Okay.
And then Francesco Di Leva is Bruno. Which character is Bruno? Do you remember? Oh, he's the other cop.
The other cop.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the main characters.
Yeah. So the plot of this movie, we'll get into that. Then I really want to hear what Mike thought about it. And then I have some notes here that I'd like to discuss. So the plot is there's a kid who he gets busted by the cops. And what he's telling people is that he had drugs on him and the cops caught him. And they're making him basically go undercover to this gay club to try to catch a politician in the act of soliciting sex from minors while giving them drugs.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a gay club per se, but some kind of underground drug sex club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what he does is he solicits sex from minors.
Yeah.
And then he gives them drugs.
So quick clarification, because I wasn't quite sure about this.
Yeah.
A politician hires cops to get some footage back, right? The guy who we see in that club who's like dressed up.
Yeah, that's the politician they're trying to get.
Okay, that's what that's the politician that hires the cops, right? Because you see a politician hire them.
No, I think somebody else hires them. Okay. So the cops, what we find out eventually is that the cops have been hired under the table to catch this guy in the act of doing what he's doing because someone wants to bring about his downfall from the government, right?
Oh, okay.
So this kid is... He basically is, they say, if you do this for us, we'll wipe your record clean, right? Now, this kid lives with his dad, and his dad has dementia. And as we find out, his dad was like a really feared criminal. And the only reason his dad is still alive, because there's a lot of people who want to kill him for the things he did as a criminal, is that he has dementia. And everyone's like, there's no point in killing this guy because he won't remember, he won't understand why we're killing him, right? Like, this is kind of a theme of the movie. So the kid runs away from the cops. He freaks out, he gets scared. And he goes to see his dad's friend because he doesn't want to go to his dad about it. And his dad's friend says, you got to go to this guy's house and he will help you. And he goes to that guy's house. The
long guy.
Yeah. And this is the guy with no hair. He's in. So we should say spoiler alert because we are going to spoil the movie in order to talk about it. So he goes to that guy's house. And as we find out, later in the movie, that guy is the former criminal cohort of the dad and just got out of jail after being in prison for, was it 12 years?
It was a while. I thought it was 8.
Okay. He was in jail for a long time, and the only reason they let him out is that he's dying of cancer. And so they let him out basically to die. His son, who I believe would be was around the same age as this kid, when his son died, And the reason he died, as we come to find out, is that the Tony Servillo character, who's the father of this kid who needs help, set them up to save himself. So he set them up. They got arrested. The son died in an accident during this robbery they had gone to do, and the cops stopped them. And there was, I don't know if there was a shootout or something, but the son died. The dad went to jail, and now this kid has come to him for help, not knowing that he hates his dad. And then, so the cops are chasing him. He's trying to get this guy to help him. The guy doesn't really want to help him. He doesn't really know what to do. And the whole thing takes place in like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's not quite real time, but it's a very compressed time frame. And it's just basically, and the other thing that's important to note that we will talk about is that while all of this is going on, the city of Rome is on fire, essentially. And there's rolling blackouts because of this huge fire that's happening. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
The first thing that struck me was like visually, it looks really good. You see lots of wide sprawling shots of the city and the fire in the background. You see a lot of them moving throughout the city and stuff. So it's really beautiful to see that. The acting's great in it.
The acting blew me away.
The acting is really good in it. The characters, I wish there was a bit more backstory on some of them, because the kid, like, we don't really know too much about him, right? And we never really find out a ton about him other than he's the son of this gangster.
Well, there is some interesting stuff about the kid, I think, but you keep going.
Overall, like, I found it to be a little slow.
Well, you know what Adagio means.
I mean, no.
Slowly.
And it fits.
That's literally what it means.
I did find it to be a bit slow, especially because I was comparing it to the only other film I've seen of his, which is...
Suburra is a much more like operatic, emotional, like, I think in a movie with a lot more plot movement.
Yes, there's a lot more plot. So this is a really, like, the way we probably describe the plot is probably confusing, but it's a really straightforward, simple film, right?
It is.
This kid is in trouble with these corrupt cops, and he's trying to get away from them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the gist of the whole plot. But it's interesting to see these like elements of underground society in Rome, because we don't live there. I've never been there. So it's kind of interesting to see that and see the happenings of it. I do wish that I wish there was more people going after him, but I guess it makes sense that like you could believe a couple rogue cops. It'd be hard to believe like everybody's after him. I always thought, and it took me a while to understand why he's like so afraid of this information leaking. Because
we find out at first we think he's been busted because he was selling drugs. Then we find out he got busted for sucking dicks, basically. He was like being a male prostitute.
Yeah, and he was doing it just to get extra cash, and he's underage.
His dad, the whole setup of this movie is like his dad is this once very feared criminal who's now, they never explicitly say what he says. I'm assuming it's dementia, right? And there are moments where he's like lucid, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of comes and goes, but we'll get into that later. Because does he actually have dementia? That's a whole other thing. But he's afraid of his dad finding out that he was prostituting himself, right? Because he's afraid of what that means in this very masculine, violent world. Yeah. He lives in like the slums, and he's surrounded by criminals, and he's not an aggressive, violent person. He's like, he loves music. He just wants to listen to music. He wants to have nice clothes. So he's trying to get money. And the way that he gets money is he prostitutes himself because he doesn't want to commit violent crimes,
right? But
he wants to make money. And so he's ashamed, but he's also worried of what the blowback will be from like this community of like violent, hardened criminals that he lives in.
Exactly.
So he lies to everyone.
The rest of the story is interesting. You really don't get a whole lot of backstory on the blind guy. Who's one of the associates. And honestly, you don't get a ton about the dad either. It's like, does he have dementia? Does he not have dementia? Yes, he was.
I have a theory on this too. Yeah,
and he did something in the past. He set up his partners to escape jail time, but that's kind of it. And then you get the most about, and what's his name? It's like Bruno, something like that, right?
Which guy?
The bald guy.
The bald guy. Because they all have multiple names.
Yeah.
So Camelo. Because they have like their alias names, and then they have their real names.
We get the most backstory about him, and he's the the most important of the three in this story.
Yeah, so he's dying of cancer. He has lots of regrets about his son dying. He was betrayed by his best friend, and now he's asked to help this kid.
And he obviously at first doesn't want to, but then I think he starts to see his son.
And what I think is okay. Here's what's so interesting. There's so many things that are so interesting to me. The first thing I'll say is actually on your point that this movie is kind of slow, and I do agree that a lot of the movie is very understated. Like it's a lot of things are not explicitly told to you, right? The narrative style really reminded me of Johnny To, movies like Election and like that whole kind of era, PTU, Election 2, Exiled, who's the Johnny To being a Hong Kong filmmaker, because his style is very similar. Like a lot of things are implicit rather than explicit, and not a lot of stuff is explained. You just watch things happening, and you kind of have to put the pieces together, right? Well, what were we talking about before that? Because you said something right as I was talking about the Johnny To style, but there was something I wanted to mention.
Backstory?
No, the thing about the son. The son dying and why what I thought was so interesting. There's a lot of metaphors in this movie, and the fire, the blackouts. Like we can talk a lot about that if we want to, but the character who the kid first goes to see is blind.
Yeah.
So this is a biblical thing of like the blind man is the only one who can see because like there's this whole metaphorical thing of like because he's not being deceived by his eyes, he's looking with his soul and his heart, and he can truly understand things, right? And the blind guy is the guy who sends him to the Camello character, who most people logically would think, don't send him there.
Yeah, it's not a great place.
But the blind guy knows that the Camello character is the only one who will truly help this kid because he knows what it's like to lose a kid. And he knows what it's like for a young person to die. And he's experienced that tragedy personally. So after he gets over his initial hesitance, he will be the most loyal one and the most important. And so I find that to be really interesting that you have this blind character. But in watching all of the Roman crime trilogy from Stefano Sollima, all of the movies in some way touch upon the history of Rome. Right. So like in All Cops Are Bastards, there's this whole thing about how the cops think of themselves as like these Roman soldiers. Right. And they talk about Rome and the history of Italy. And like there's also like a lot of fascist imagery in that movie with like World War II and Mussolini and stuff like that. In Suburra, obviously, there's a whole plot about the Vatican. Right. And the Pope is retiring and there's like religious people caught up in this whole like in this political corruption. In this movie, Rome is Burning, which is a very famous thing from ancient Rome where Nero, the Emperor Nero, played the violin while Rome burned, right? So I think that all of these movies have themes and metaphors and stuff like that are looking at like the entire, and Suburra, the title of that film, comes from ancient Rome, right? So it's like this continuity of this city over thousands of years as this center of enormous power, but enormous corruption, where you have these like disenfranchised masses struggling to get by. And so in a way, I almost feel like the fire and the title of the movie, Slowly, right? Adagio is like a slow movement in music, is in a way about life in general as a metaphor for like enormous power, disenfranchised people, everyone's trying to get by. And then also I think Adagio could be related to, because I think ultimately what this movie is about in a way is forgiveness, like regret, and redemption. And all of these characters in some way, the older characters, are able to achieve that. And that happens slowly over time.